Hey, Sean here from SpeedCubeReview.com. I've talked about a few different books, Cracking the Cube, Ian Scheffler, some really old books that talk about how to solve the cube. And I actually plan on making a video on Andres and his Rubik's Cube Madness. My dogs end up really liking the book too.
Nutella, you were fine. You didn't do anything wrong. But Mojo, how do you feel about what you did?
And this isn't a bad book. It's a nice kid's book that talks about learning the cube, and the person obviously knows what they're talking about and learning the cube. It's wonderful. I actually plan on doing a whole sketch with like a reading rainbow kind of thing, but I ended up not doing that. And I only have one issue with this. The person talks a lot about trying to get below 35 seconds so they can go to nationals, but it's not very clear. They're talking about going to nationals, and it's a little confusing, and it almost sounds like you have to be under 35 seconds to compete. So, little correction there. That's one thing I don't like about this, but it's a nice book, so make sure your dogs stay away from it, though. The one book I want to talk about, though, is Ernő Rubik's book. It came out over a year ago. I've read through it, and it's a lot of fun to read. So I definitely have the digital version, so I could highlight some stuff with it. One thing with a lot of books that from people who are not normally authors is that there are other people writing it. It's very obvious no one else is writing this but Ernő Rubik. So my favorite thing, on the very first page, you see Ernő Rubik write, "My official name is the Rubik's Cube." Also, this is written as if the Rubik's Cube is the one telling the story. Quote, "Cube Rubik sounds more natural to me, but nobody has really asked me about my feelings." There's a lot of really fun stuff in here, and I think things that maybe don't translate as well. So for example, on page 4, if you take a ball in your hand, it is a totally different feeling, soft, supple. A cube is a boy with edges and muscles. So now we know a cube is a boy with edges and muscles. And then we also get on that same page, "I hate to write," in all capital letters, "yet here I am writing this book. There is no way back." Now, with all that said, there's some really interesting stuff in here. There's also a lot of random ramblings from Ernő Rubik. I like this quote about what puzzles give to us. "Puzzles bring out important qualities in each of us: concentration, curiosity, a sense of play, the eagerness to discover a solution. These are the very same qualities that form the bedrock for all human creativity. Puzzles are not just entertainment or devices for killing time. For us, as for our ancestors, they help point the way to our creative potential. If you are curious, you will find the puzzles around you. If you are determined, you will solve them." That I love. If I am ever asked to give a discussion on what's so important about the cube, I will be using that quote for sure. One thing I love is that he quotes Douglas Adams, which is one of my favorite writers, and says in Douglas Adams' novel, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, where Dirk says, quote, "Don't you understand that we need to be childish in order to understand? Only a child sees things with perfect clarity, because it hasn't developed all those filters which prevent us from seeing things that we don't expect to see." Now, this video honestly just might be me reading quotes from the book, because as a review, it's a nice book. It's a little bit out of a read. It's definitely not made for children. It doesn't seem like it's written for people who are cubers or non-cubers. It is just what it is. It's just Ernő Rubik putting his thoughts down on paper. I feel like Cracking the Cube is something more for people who are non-cubers. There's a bunch of stuff in here that I learned, like the origin of T-Noodle application that does all the scrambles for the WCA. That's something that's really cool in here, but it's written with the audience of that. This is just written. There is something in here that I think a lot of people get confused on, is what was the point of the puzzle? Why was it created? And as Ernő Rubik was creating it, he was creating it as a concept for something that could move in 3D space yet still stay together. And it says, "At this point, I should note that I had never once occurred to me that I was creating a puzzle. My search for a solution was an end in itself. I was working on the idea to solve a problem that I had formulated for myself, a rather innocent activity without terms or categories." And I'm wondering if his goal was to develop a puzzle, would we have something completely different? Could be more crazy or less creative, thinking about how hard should this puzzle be? There's also at the beginning of each chapter is different quotes. So this one's from R. Buckminster Fuller. I actually don't know much about that person, so I'm going to look that up. It says, when I'm working on a problem, I never think about beauty, but when I have finished, if the solution is not beautiful, I know it's wrong. We get into his thought process in creating the puzzle and how at first he didn't think of a need for anything in the middle to keep it structurally sound besides rubber bands that he was using to hold it together. And this actually found really fascinating. It says, in the final version, I used spring-loaded screws that pulled the face centers pieces under constant tension towards the center. These pieces grip the edge pieces and these grip the corner pieces. I had great hopes for the simple mechanism and was sure that it would work. What I find fascinating with that is that from the beginning there were springs in the center pieces. I always wondered when springs started in center pieces, and from the beginning, that was it. Now this I find kind of humorous, talking about the colors and adding colors to the cube. And as a lot of us know, the colors are not what they are today when it first started. And what we will often see as the Japanese color scheme is what that was. It says, I began with the primary colors, that is yellow, blue, and red, and placed stickers on those colors on 3 neighboring sides accordingly. I then added the complementary colors of green and orange. I settled upon painting the 6th face white. I didn't use purple because for me, it did not fit with the cube's masculine aesthetic. I've never thought of the cube as being masculine or feminine. This is an interesting concept. I'm curious, leave down in the comment section below if this is something more common in other cultures and other countries. In English, we don't have masculine or feminine words like there might be in French. Do people associate things with masculinity or femininity based on those words? Like the word pizza in French is a feminine word. Do people think of it as a feminine food, or is that a different concept altogether? So let me know below, because I'm really curious about this. And one thing that a lot of people know by now is it took Ernő Rubik about a month to solve the puzzle, which is impressive for me because it took me like 25 years. A lot of us know about the Rubik snake, and it says here the snake was a product I made before the cube. It was an art exhibition, and I created red and blue snake from wood. Now, they seem to be coming back. A lot of companies are making their own version of them again. Even though it's not something that we see in competitions, we're seeing the snake kind of come back. And actually, in the school that I teach at, a lot of kids have those. I've seen a few in the Lost and Found already. Some other just random information, kind of like the whole Teen Doodle thing. The term Seven Towns, which was the original distributor of Rubik's Cube, was named after the owner's birthplace in Transylvania. Some other things like the change the name from Magic Cube to Rubik's Cube happened because the idea of patenting the word magic in cube seemed not possible. So some interesting things there. I'm not going to spoil the whole book because I would suggest going and reading it. I would also suggest reading Ian Shuffler's book, Cracking the Cube, and he interviews Ernő Rubik in there, so you can read both and see how it's all connected. I do appreciate this. There's a quote from Steve Jobs, but then Ernő Rubik says, my approach to money has always been to ignore it. My sense of money, if I have any, is a feeling that money is kind of harmful because it creates work, and you have to make a special effort if you have it, and you need to look after it and handle it. And that's not something that inspires me. I kind of take that in my own making of videos. If I was worried about making money with videos, I would make completely different videos. Reviewing a book is not going to get a ton of views, but I love doing it. So one final thing I want to quote from here is something else the Cube does. It's on page 169, and it says it teaches us to tolerate frustration. There was a video that I did with Tingman where it's on his channel and he talks to different people like me who are musicians. Music is my job. That is my living. And talk about why are there so many cubers who are musicians, and if there are, or it's just our perception. And the fact that it helps us tolerate frustration, I think, is key. Musical instruments are frustrating. There's no automatic reward from it. It's rewarding the more you do and just loving that you're creating music. So solving the cube starts with frustration, and it keeps being frustrating if your focus is on getting a certain time or learning something right away. I've certainly been frustrated. It happens quite often with FMC, and that's something I'm dealing with. But if you're interested in reading this book, check the link below. That's a link to a copy you can purchase on Amazon. I also have Cracking the Cube there, as well as the kids book that I talked about earlier. Just keep it away from your dog. If there's any book that you know of that I haven't talked about that you think might be really interesting, let me know. I love reading this stuff. If you've read the book, let me know your favorite quotes from the book below. Hit like, subscribe for more content like this in the future. And as always, stop by speedcubeview.com for news and reviews.